The ground is red clay, stained darker by rain and time. The soldiers do not know what they are looking for: gold, documents. They have been marching through Georgia for weeks, following General Sherman's path of destruction, and they have learned to look for value in the places that rich people desperately try to protect. The rose garden is overgrown. It has not been tended in years. The roses, once cultivated into architectural arrangements, have become wild, spreading in chaotic tangles across what was once a carefully ordered landscape. The soldiers push through them, their uniforms tearing on thorns, their skin bleeding from the scratches of plants that have learned to defend themselves. One of them, a private named James Hartley, notices the ground is different. It is more solid, more compact, as though something has been buried deeply and the earth has been disturbed and then packed down again. He kneels and begins to dig with his hands. His sergeant tells him to stop wasting time, but something in the quality of the ground speaks to him. There is intention here. There is architecture beneath the earth. It takes 3 men to excavate. What emerges is a wooden structure, a box, a coffin, ornately decorated with brass fittings and velvet padding. It is far too elaborate to be a grave. It is more like a piece of furniture, more like a bed, more like something designed for sleep rather than death. The coffin lid is nailed shut. It takes effort to pry it open. And when they do, when the lid finally gives way, the smell that emerges is the smell of death in its most refined form, not the fresh death of a battlefield, but the slow death of containment, of sealed spaces, of bodies that have been preserved in darkness for so long that the process of decay has taken on a peculiar quality, a peculiar stink. Inside the coffin is a girl. She is perhaps 16 years old. She is wearing a white dress yellowed by time and stained with substances that do not bear examination. Her face is turned to the side, and her expression is peaceful, as though she has simply decided to sleep and has continued sleeping for years. But her hands tell a different story. Her hands are shredded. The fingernails are broken, worn away by continuous scratching. The skin is raw and torn where her nails have scraped against something. And the inside of the coffin lid shows the evidence. Scratch marks, deep gouges, marks that can only have been made by a hand clawing against wood, marks that tell the story of someone who woke up in this space, who realized where she was, who tried desperately to escape. The soldiers find the other coffins nearby, 3 in total. 3 daughters. 3 elaborately constructed graves, each one connected by copper piping to the surface piping that was meant to provide air, that was meant to allow breath even in the deepest burial, that has now been crushed and blocked by years of neglect. And the weight of the earth above, not one of the soldiers vomits. Another simply stares, unable to process what he is looking at. And Private Hartley, the one who began the digging, closes his eyes and tries to imagine what it must have been like. The darkness, the realization, the understanding that the world above had moved on, that rescue would not come. The bodies are removed, and the story begins to spread through the chaotic landscape of a nation in the process of tearing itself apart. Colonel Silas Blackwood, the plantation owner who buried his daughters alive, is found on the porch of his house, sitting in a rocking chair, humming a lullaby. He has been there for days, or perhaps weeks. Time has lost meaning for him. He rocks back and forth, his thin hands gripping the arms of the chair, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the earth itself, somewhere in a space that only he can see. When the soldiers approach him, when they tell him what they have found, he does not respond. He simply continues humming. He does not seem to understand that they are speaking to him. He does not seem to understand that anything has changed. He continues to rock, continues to hum, as though the discovery of the graves, the removal of the bodies, the end of the secret, means nothing whatsoever. The soldiers do not arrest him immediately. They are uncertain what crime legally has been committed. The girls were his daughters. The graves were on his property. The intention, while incomprehensible, seems to have been to preserve rather than to harm. And the chaos of the Civil War has made the normal rules of law and order seem quaint and irrelevant. By the time anyone arrives with the authority to arrest Colonel Blackwood, he is dead. He has continued to sit in his rocking chair, continuing to hum his lullaby, and his heart has simply stopped. There is no wound. There is no poison. There is simply the cessation of a life that had become unbearable, the merciful stopping of a mind that had evolved beyond the capacity to survive in a world that had revealed itself to be fundamentally wrong. But the story does not end with his death. The story is only beginning. 2 years before the beginning of his descent into madness, Colonel Silas Blackwood is, by all accounts, a man of some accomplishment. He is 52 years old. He is the patriarch of a substantial plantation in northern Georgia. He is wealthy, respected, educated. He has built something that is meant to last, a family legacy, a dynasty, a structure that will persist long after he is gone. His wife, Eleanor, died 7 years ago. She passed away peacefully, attended by servants and a doctor, leaving behind 3 daughters, who are her image, pale, refined, with the kind of delicate beauty that suggests they have never been exposed to the harsh light of full reality. The oldest, Constance, is 16. The middle daughter, Margaret, is 14. The youngest, Catherine, is 10. Silas loves his daughters with an intensity that borders on obsession. He does not see this as abnormal. He sees it as the natural result of being a widower, of having placed all of his emotional resources into the care and protection of these 3 girls who are, after all, the only remaining connection to the young wife he lost so prematurely. The plantation is structured around their comfort. The servants are instructed to anticipate their needs before they can articulate them. The house is maintained at the temperature that they prefer. The food is prepared according to their preferences. The entire elaborate machinery of Southern aristocratic life is arranged in concentric circles around the presence of these 3 girls. Constance is educated beyond what is typical for a girl of her age. Silas has hired tutors, a man of classical learning, a woman versed in the arts, a musician from New York. Constance absorbs everything. She is intelligent in a way that her father finds both gratifying and slightly disturbing. She asks questions. She expresses opinions. She is beautiful in a way that attracts attention. At 14, she is already being noticed by the young men of the county, and Silas finds himself developing a complicated mixture of pride and possessiveness at this attention. He wants her to be admired, but he does not want her to be touched. He does not want her to develop the kind of independence that comes with romantic attention, the kind of separateness that comes with being seen as a potential wife rather than simply as a daughter. Catherine is his favorite. This is something that Silas does not admit to anyone, but something that is visible in the way his face softens when he looks at her, in the way he holds her hand when they walk through the gardens, in the way he seems unable to imagine a future in which she is not directly at his side. He reads to them in the evenings. He has selected the books himself, not the typical fare for young girls, but rather books of philosophy, books of history, books that he believes will educate them about the true nature of the world. He wants them to understand that the world is not safe, that there are evil forces at work, that they will need to be careful to maintain their purity in a world that is becoming increasingly corrupt. It is in these readings, in these evening lectures disguised as entertainment, that the obsession begins to reveal itself. Silas speaks to them about the degradation of society. He speaks about the impending conflict between the North and the South. He speaks about how this conflict is not simply a political matter, but a sign of something much larger they approach. Of the apocalypse, the end of the world, the final judgment. The world is becoming impure, he tells them, his voice taking on a quality that is almost hypnotic. Evil is spreading like a disease. The only way to remain pure is to separate ourselves, to isolate ourselves, to create spaces where the corruption cannot reach. Constance listens with the attention of someone who is hearing the voice of authority, but also with the subtle skepticism of someone who is beginning to understand that her father's view of the world might not be entirely rational. She asks gentle questions. But Father, do you truly believe that the world is ending? The newspapers speak of political disputes, not of apocalypse. The newspapers lie, Silas responds, and his voice carries a certainty that does not permit argument. The newspapers are controlled by forces that wish to deceive you. I am telling you the truth. The truth is that the world is ending, and we must prepare to preserve what is pure within it. Margaret listens and says nothing. She has learned that her father's moods are unpredictable, that questioning him too directly leads to a kind of emotional withdrawal that is worse than any direct punishment could be. She has learned to nod and smile and appear to accept his words while maintaining a kind of internal distance from them. Catherine listens and believes. She is young enough to accept her father's worldview as truth. She is old enough to be frightened by it. She begins to have dreams about the end of the world. She begins to understand, on some level of consciousness, that she cannot quite articulate, that her father is afraid. And because she is afraid of being left alone, because she depends on him entirely, she absorbs his fear and makes it her own god. It is during this period that Silas begins to spend time in the basement of the house. He has commissioned construction of an underground chamber. He tells people it is a summer refuge, a place designed to maintain coolness in the hot Georgia summers. But the structure he is building is more elaborate than this simple function would require. He is building rooms. He is installing ventilation systems. He is constructing something that will allow people to exist underground for extended periods of time. He does not explain this to his daughters. He does not explain it to anyone. But Eleanor's old housekeeper, a woman named Ruth, who has served, that the obsessive love he bore for his wife has been redirected toward his daughters, and that this redirected love has taken on a quality that is disturbing, a quality that suggests intention that goes far beyond simple paternal devotion. He is building something for them, Ruth tells the other servants. He is building something to keep them safe, or to keep them contained. I cannot determine which. By early 1860, the underground chamber is complete. It is elaborate. It is beautiful. In a way, it contains elegant furniture. It contains beds with silk sheets. It contains books and paintings and musical instruments. It is designed to be comfortable, to be a place where one could live, but where the surface of the earth is always above, always present. To his daughters immediately. He first prepares them psychologically. He increases his lectures about the coming apocalypse. He begins to discuss the historical records of those who have survived world-ending catastrophes by isolating themselves, by creating sanctuaries in remote places, by waiting out the period of chaos in sealed chambers. If the world ends, he asks them during one evening lecture, where would you want to be? Would you want to be in the chaos, experiencing the corruption and destruction? Or would you want to be in a place of safety, protected and preserved, waiting for the world to be renewed? Constance answers carefully. I would want to understand what is happening. I would want to know the truth, even if it was terrible. But Margaret and Catherine both answer, I would want to be with you. I would want to be safe. And Silas smiles, and his smile is filled with something that looks like love, but contains something else beneath it, something that looks like hunger, something that suggests he has been waiting for these daughters to arrive at exactly this. Understanding, the understanding that they would choose safety over truth, that they would choose to be protected by him, even if protection meant separation from the world. "Come," he says to them one afternoon in late spring. "There is something I have built for you. A place where you will be safe. A place where the corruption of the world cannot reach you." And he leads them down the stairs that descend into the basement, and he shows them the underground chamber, and he watches their faces as they realize what he has built. And he understands, from the expressions he sees there, that something fundamental is about to change, that the obsessive love he has been cultivating for so long is about to find expression in a way that will transform the nature of his relationship with his daughters forever. By August of 1860, the 3 daughters of Colonel Silas Blackwood have ceased to appear in public, and explained to curious neighbors through a consistent story. The girls have been sent to France for their safety. Silas has received letters of introduction, and they have been placed with a respectable French family of his acquaintance. They will remain there until the political situation in America has resolved itself. This explanation is accepted readily by those who do not know Silas well, but there are those in the community who are suspicious. Ruth, the old housekeeper, has noticed that Silas purchases laudanum in increasingly large quantities. She has noticed that he appears to be feeding 3 people while claiming that his daughters are in France. She has noticed that he has locked off the basement of the house, and that no servants are permitted to enter that area. She attempts to express her concerns to the overseer of the plantation, a man named Mr. Garrett, but Mr. Garrett dismisses her worries. Colonel Blackwood is grieving his wife, he tells her. There is no law against a man loving his children too much, but Ruth is not satisfied. She begins to leave notes for the servants, instructing them to listen for sounds coming from the basement. She begins to gather information about what might be happening below the surface of the house. And slowly, over months, a picture emerges. The daughters are not in France. The daughters are in the basement. They are being kept there. And Silas is medicating them, dosing them with laudanum, keeping them in a state of perpetual semi-consciousness. This information spreads through the servant community in whispers. It is discussed in the quarters where the enslaved people live, who are, paradoxically, because they have access to places and information that the white community does not have access to. He has buried his daughters alive, but no one acts on this information. This is 1860. The country is fracturing. The servants are enslaved. They have no legal standing to interfere with what a plantation owner does with his own family. And there is something about the situation that makes even the servants reluctant to speak, something about the intensity of Silas's love for his daughters that makes them understand that this is not cruelty in the conventional sense, but rather a kind of twisted devotion, a love so powerful that it has become pathological. Silas, meanwhile, is convinced that he is saving his daughters. He descends to the basement every day. He tends to them with the care of a man maintaining a precious garden. He changes their laudanum dosages, adjusting them to keep them in a state of gentle sleep, a state of suspended animation in which they do not suffer, do not age, do not experience the corruption of the world above. He talks to them, even though they cannot hear him, even though they are asleep, even though the medication has rendered them deaf to all external stimuli. He tells them about the world above. He tells them that war has begun. He tells them about the barbarity that is occurring on battlefields. He tells them that he is protecting them from all of this, that they will wake up when it is over, that they will wake up in a world that has been purified by fire. "You are my treasures," he tells them, his voice filled with an emotion that cannot be categorized as either love or possession, but something that contains elements of both. When the world is renewed, when the apocalypse is past, when purity has been restored, then I will wake you. Then you will emerge and see the new world. And you will understand that your father was right. You will understand that this was the only way. He believes this entirely. He has constructed a rational framework in which his actions make perfect sense, in which burying his daughters alive is an act of love, in which the medication is a mercy, in which the darkness is a protection. He has convinced himself so completely of the rightness of his actions that he seems to glow with the certainty of the righteous. The war progresses. 1860 becomes 1861. The conflict that Silas predicted is now a reality. But it is not the apocalypse. He becomes thinner. His eyes develop a quality of intense fixation. He stops engaging with the world above ground. He spends most of his time in the basement, tending to his daughters, adjusting their medication, monitoring their breathing, checking the pipes that are meant to provide them with air. By 1863, 3 years into the war, the plantation has been taken over by Union forces. The enslaved people have been freed. The fields have been burned. He remains in the basement with his daughters, as though the world above has already ended, as though the apocalypse has already occurred, and he is simply waiting for it to finish so that he can wake them. The soldiers who come to the house initially do not know that Silas is still alive. They loot what remains of the structure. They search for valuables. They look for anything that might be of use to the Union Army. And Silas, sitting in the basement with his daughters, simply watches them move overhead, listening to their footsteps, understanding with the part of his mind that still functions that the end is coming, that the world above is destroying itself, that the apocalypse is finally arriving. But his daughters do not wake up. The medication keeps them asleep, even as the world ends. The pipes that are meant to provide air are being crushed and blocked by the chaos above. And Silas, in his basement sanctuary, is beginning to understand that something has gone wrong, that the plan he has constructed so carefully has encountered a complication, that the suspended animation in which he has kept his daughters may not be suspended animation at all. By 1864, he has stopped descending to the basement regularly. He sits on the porch of the ruined house and rocks back and forth, humming lullabies, his mind having finally broken completely under the weight of what he has done, under the realization of what he is in the process of doing, under the understanding that the apocalypse he predicted has arrived, but that his daughters have not been saved by it. They have been buried in it. The diary of Colonel Silas Blackwood is recovered by Union soldiers in 1865. It is preserved as evidence of his mental illness. And later, it becomes a historical document, something that is studied by those attempting to understand the psychological impact of the Civil War on the Southern aristocracy. The entries begin in early 1860 and continue through 1864. They document, with the precision of a man tracking something that he believes is important, the descent of a father into obsession and madness. January 15th, 1860. I have completed the sanctuary. It is beautiful. It is everything that I designed it to be. Eleanor would approve. She always understood that the world was dangerous, that innocence needed to be protected. I have created a structure that will allow me to protect my daughters in a way that she would have approved of. I have created a place where they will be safe, but I must be careful. I must not alarm them. I must prepare them slowly for what is to come. I must help them understand that the world is ending, that they will need to accept my protection, that being kept safe will require a kind of surrender to my judgment. I am their father. I know what is best. I know what will save them. March 3rd, 1860. Constance asked me today if the underground chamber was meant for them. She has begun to understand. She has begun to sense my intention. This is problematic. Constance is too intelligent. She is too capable of doubt. She is too willing to question my judgment. I may need to address this. I may need to ensure that her intelligence does not become a barrier to her acceptance of what must be done. Margaret is more amenable. She has learned that obedience is easier than questioning. She will accept what I tell her. Catherine will accept what I tell her because she is young and because she loves me. But Constance will require more persuasion. May 10th, 1860. It has begun. I have brought them down for the first time. They were hesitant. Constance was resistant. One explained to her that this was a temporary measure, that I was simply preparing them for the possibility of needing to use the sanctuary. She did not believe me, but she also did not resist. What power a father has over his children, not through force, but through the simple fact of being the person they depend upon for everything. Margaret wept. Catherine asked if she could sleep there. Yes, I told her. You can sleep there whenever you wish. This is a safe place. This is a place where nothing can hurt you. But this is not true. This is a place where everything can hurt them, if I choose to hurt them. This is a place where I can control their existence in ways that are not possible in the world above. This is a place where I can keep them exactly as I wish them to be, pure, protected, preserved. July 22nd, 1860. I have begun the medication. They resisted at first. Constance demanded to know what it was. I told her the truth. It is medicine to help them sleep. I did not tell her the full truth, that the sleep will be deep, that it will last longer than normal sleep, that it will require me to maintain it through careful dosing and constant attention. Constance tried to refuse the medication. This was a moment of crisis. For a moment, I considered allowing her to refuse. For a moment, I considered releasing all of them, abandoning my plan, returning them to the world above. But then I looked at her face, and I saw the doubt there, the questioning, the willingness to disobey. And I understood that I could not allow that. I could not allow any of them to have the power to refuse me. So I increased the dosage until she could no longer resist. And then I administered it, and she slept, and I held her hand in the darkness of the sanctuary, and I told her that this was for her own good. September 10th, 1860. They are sleeping now. All three of them. Deep sleep, the kind of sleep from which they might not wake for a very long time. I have constructed the coffins with great care. They are not coffins in the sense of death. They are sleep chambers, preservation chambers, places where they will be kept safe and protected until the world above has been purified by fire. The pipes provide air. The temperature is controlled. I have attended to every detail. They will not suffer. They will not age. They will remain exactly as they are now, frozen in time, preserved like flowers, pressed between the pages of a book. I'm beginning to understand that this is the ultimate expression of my love for them. Not to allow them to grow and change and eventually leave me, but to keep them as they are now, forever, perfect and protected and entirely mine. December 3rd, 1860. Eleanor would be proud. I have done what needed to be done. I have saved them. I have protected them from the world that is about to end. I can feel it coming now, the apocalypse, the end of all things. And my daughters will wake up after it has passed, and they will see the new world that has been born from the ashes of the old. And they will understand that their father was right all along, but I must be careful now. I must maintain their sleep. I must not allow the medication to wear off too quickly. I must keep them suspended between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion, between the world that they knew and the world that will be revealed when they wake. March 15th, 1861. War has begun. It is as I predicted. The apocalypse is unfolding exactly as I knew it would. The South is fighting against the North. Brother fights brother. The world is being destroyed by its own evil. And my daughters sleep through it all, protected and safe in their sanctuary beneath the earth. I wonder sometimes if I should wake them. I wonder if they should see what I am trying to save them from. But no, they are better asleep. They are better not knowing. They are better preserved in ignorance. June 22nd, 1862. I have been checking the pipes. I am concerned that the seal may not be as complete as I believed. I have observed small fluctuations in the air quality. I have adjusted the system, but I am beginning to understand that maintaining a sealed underground chamber is more complex than I anticipated. There are factors beyond my control. There are variables that I cannot predict, but I will manage. I will be vigilant. I will not allow anything to harm them. This is my responsibility. This is my purpose now. November 4th, 1863. The Union has taken the county. Soldiers march through the fields. The plantation is burning. The world above is ending exactly as I predicted. And still my daughters sleep. Still they are safe. Still they are protected from the chaos and destruction that is occurring above them. I have stopped attempting to maintain the house. There is no point. The world above is already destroyed. What remains is only the sanctuary below. That is all that matters now. That is all that has ever mattered. February 14th, 1864. I am uncertain how long it has been since I have checked on them. Days, weeks. Time has become difficult to track. The world above seems to exist in a state of perpetual chaos. Soldiers come and go. Sometimes they are wearing blue, sometimes gray. The difference between them seems irrelevant to me now. I descended to the sanctuary yesterday, or perhaps today. The medication smell was strong, too strong. I adjusted the dosages, but I am beginning to understand that I may have made an error. I may have miscalculated. The pipes do not seem to be functioning as I designed them. The air is stale. The temperature is wrong, but they are still sleeping. That is all that matters. They are still sleeping, and as long as they are sleeping, they are safe. May 10th, 1864. I cannot descend anymore. I do not know why. My legs will not carry me. My mind will not permit it. I sit on the porch and I hum to them instead. I hum the lullabies that Eleanor used to sing to them when they were small. I tell them that I am here. I tell them that I am protecting them. I tell them that the apocalypse is almost over, and that soon they will wake up, but I can no longer hear them breathing. This troubles me, but it is probably just the distance. The sanctuary is very far beneath the earth. Sound does not travel well through soil. They are breathing. They must be breathing. They are still sleeping, and as long as they are sleeping, they are safe. The final entry is dated June 3rd, 1864. The handwriting is almost illegible. The words running together, the syntax breaking down into fragments. They are sleeping, still sleeping, my beautiful. Daughters, they are safe in the sanctuary, beneath the earth, and soon the apocalypse will end, and the world will be pure. Again, and they will wake, and they will see, and they will understand that their father was right all along, that love means protection, means isolation, means keeping. Them from the corruption of the world means keeping. Them in darkness, so that when the light comes again they will be blinded by its purity, and they will see that this was all an act of love, this was all an act of preservation, this was all an act of. The entry ends mid-sentence, and there are no more entries after that. The opening of the graves is a watershed moment in the Civil War's chaos. For a brief moment, in the middle of a conflict that has become almost abstract in its scale and brutality, the discovery of the 3 buried daughters of Colonel Silas Blackwood becomes a point of focus, a concrete example of the ways that the war has fractured the minds of those who remained at home. The newspapers publish the story. Southern madness reaches its apex, reads one headline. Plantation owner buries daughters alive in delusional act, reads another. The story spreads rapidly through the North, where it is used as evidence of the moral bankruptcy of the Southern aristocracy, the psychological toll of slavery and power unchecked, the inevitable descent of a civilization, built on the enslavement of other human beings into complete madness. But the story is more complex than the newspapers suggest. The examination of the bodies reveals that the girls have been dead for some time. Exactly how long is difficult to determine, but the decay suggests at least a year, possibly longer. The scratch marks on the inside of the coffin lids are unmistakable evidence that at some point the medication wore off, that the girls woke up, that they understood where they were, that they attempted to escape. The Union medical officers who examine the remains are trained to look for evidence of torture, of violence, of abuse. They find none. What they find instead is evidence of a kind of care. The elaborate coffins are lined with silk. They are furnished with pillows and blankets. They contain the remnants of flowers that have been placed there carefully. Evidence of a man tending to the vessels that contain the bodies of his daughters with the attention of someone. Maintaining a garden. The psychological evaluation of Colonel Silas Blackwood becomes a matter of significant importance. Mental health experts from the North arrive in Georgia to interview him, to understand his motivations, to determine whether he is legally responsible for his actions or whether he should be considered insane. But Silas refuses to speak. He sits on the porch and hums his lullabies, and he does not respond to questions, and he does not acknowledge that anything unusual has happened. He simply continues to rock back and forth, his mind having retreated so completely from reality that contact with the world seems impossible. A military psychiatrist named Dr. Edmund Graves examines him and concludes, Colonel Blackwood is no longer present in his own mind. He has constructed an alternative reality in which his actions are not only justified, but required the only possible expression of love for his daughters. In his mind, he has not buried them alive. He has preserved them. He has saved them. And they are sleeping peacefully beneath the earth, waiting for the day when the world will be pure again and they can be awakened. The tragedy is that he has achieved, through his delusion, a kind of consistency. In his mind, the world ends and his daughters sleep through it. When the world is reborn, they will wake. He cannot comprehend the possibility that the sleeping might have ended in any other way. The scratch marks on the coffin lids exist in his mind, but he interprets them as something other than what they are. Perhaps he believes they are marks left by his daughters before they fell into their deep sleep. Perhaps he does not process them at all. He is, in short, insane. But his insanity has a structure. It has a logic. It is not random. And this is perhaps the most terrible thing about him. Not that he is mad, but that he is not so mad that he cannot justify his madness to himself with perfect coherence. The question of Colonel Silas Blackwood's legal responsibility becomes moot when he dies. He dies sitting on the porch, humming his lullaby, and there is no one present to document the moment of his death. One of the soldiers finds him the next morning, his body still warm, his hands still moving slightly in the rocking motion that has become his primary expression of existence. An autopsy reveals that his heart has simply stopped. There is no poison. There is no violence. He has simply decided, at a level of consciousness that cannot be articulated, that he is finished. And his body has agreed. But the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood does not end with his death. If anything, it expands. In the weeks following the discovery of the graves, other former plantation owners begin to be investigated for similar crimes. How many other daughters have been buried? How many other underground sanctuaries exist beneath the earth? How many other men have convinced themselves that love means burial? That protection means isolation? That salvation means death in darkness? The answer is none. The investigation reveals no other cases. Colonel Silas Blackwood appears to have been unique in his madness. Unique in his particular combination of obsession and delusion. Unique in his willingness to act on the conviction that the end of the world justified the entombment of those he loved most. This uniqueness is, in its own way, as disturbing as if there had been many cases. It suggests that there was something in Colonel Silas Blackwood, something in his personality, his background, his relationship to his daughters, that created a specific pathway to this particular madness. That the conditions had to align in exactly the right way to produce this specific manifestation of paternal obsession and apocalyptic delusion in the years following the Civil War. As the nation begins the process of reconstruction and healing, the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood fades from public consciousness. It is used occasionally as an example of the psychological damage caused by the war, the toll that the conflict took on those who remained at home. But it is gradually forgotten, filed away as a curiosity, a reminder of a darker time, but in the small town near where the plantation stood, in the community that was terrorized by the knowledge that something unimaginable was occurring beneath the earth. The story does not fade. It persists. It becomes part of the local history, part of the mythology of the place. A story that parents tell their children as a warning about the dangers of love taken to its extreme, about the ways that obsession can masquerade as protection, about the capacity of the human mind to construct justifications for almost any action. The plantation is burned to the ground in the final months of the Civil War. There is nothing left of the house, except for blackened stone and scattered brick. The rose garden is trampled by soldiers and animals. The ground where the graves were located is churned up, torn open, exposed to the sky that Colonel Silas Blackwood believed would bring apocalypse. The sanctuary beneath the earth is destroyed when the house above it collapses. The coffins are crushed. The pipes are broken. The elegant chamber that Colonel Silas Blackwood built to be a place of eternal preservation becomes instead a grave. Literally this time, no longer a sanctuary of suspended animation, but a true tomb. The three daughters are buried again, properly this time, in the cemetery of the town. The headstones do not carry the correct dates of death because no one knows exactly when they died, exactly when the medication wore off, exactly when the darkness claimed them. The stones simply read, "Daughter of Colonel Silas Blackwood, born in grace, died in darkness." In the decades that follow, the land where the plantation stood is gradually reclaimed by nature. The fields grow wild. The trees spread. The boundary between human cultivation and natural growth becomes ambiguous. And the spot where the rose garden once stood becomes simply another piece of overgrown land, indistinguishable from the forest that surrounds it. But the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood does not remain hidden. In 1890, 30 years after his death, a historian named Dr. Matthew Cornwell publishes a book titled The Buried Heart: Love and Madness in the American South. The book examines the psychology of Colonel Silas Blackwood, the cultural context that allowed his obsession to develop, the ways that the impending Civil War may have accelerated his mental deterioration. Dr. Cornwell argues that Silas Blackwood was not unique in his obsession with purity, but rather that he was an extreme example of a pathology that was endemic to the Southern aristocracy, the cult of Southern womanhood, the obsession with honor and protection, the fortress mentality that developed as the conflict approached. All of these, Cornwell argues, created the conditions in which a man like Silas Blackwood could convince himself that the most loving thing he could do was to bury his daughters alive. The book is initially dismissed as sensationalism, as an attempt to capitalize on a tragedy for commercial purposes. but it gradually gains respect in academic circles. It becomes used in seminars about the psychology of the Civil War, about the ways that conflict affects the minds of those at home, about the capacity of human beings to construct elaborate justifications for terrible acts. The journal entries of Colonel Silas Blackwood are examined by psychologists, by literary scholars, by those attempting to understand the pathology of parental obsession. And they find in those entries evidence of a mind gradually losing its grip on reality, a mind constructing increasingly elaborate justifications for increasingly terrible acts, a mind capable of acknowledging certain facts while simultaneously denying their implications. In particular, scholars focus on the final entries, on the moment when Silas seems to understand that something has gone wrong, that the medication has worn off, that the sleeping has ended in a way that he did not predict. How much did he know? How much did he understand? And at what point did his mind simply decide that the only way to survive was to retreat completely into the fiction he had constructed, to become the man on the porch humming lullabies to the ground? These are questions that can never be fully answered. The only person who knows the truth has taken that knowledge with him into death. By the 1920s, the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood has become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of parental obsession, a warning about the ways that love can transform into possession, that protection can become imprisonment, that the desire to preserve can become the desire to control. In the 1950s, a television program dramatizes the story. In the 1970s, a novel based on the events becomes a bestseller. In the present day, the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood is known to those interested in the history of the Civil War, to those studying the psychology of obsession, to those concerned with the treatment of mental illness. But somewhere in the soil of northern Georgia, in the ground where the plantation stood, where the rose garden grew, where the sanctuary was located, something of Colonel Silas Blackwood remains. Not his physical body that was buried decades ago, but something of his intention, something of his obsession, something of the act of burial itself seems to have seeped into the earth, to have become part of the landscape. Local residents report strange phenomena. They speak of hearing lullabies on quiet nights, of hearing voices that sound like children singing songs they should not know, of finding roses growing in the midst of the overgrown land, roses that bloom at odd times of the year, roses that seem to be arranged in patterns too intentional to be natural. None of this can be verified. None of this is documented, but it persists as rumor, as local legend, as the kind of story that communities tell about their own history, the kind of narrative that emerges when the truth is too terrible to be fully articulated, when the mind needs to transform the real into the symbolic, when the historical fact must be supplemented by something that reaches beyond mere fact into the realm of meaning. In 1992, a researcher named Dr. Sarah Chun visits the site of the former Blackwood Plantation. She is conducting research on mass burial sites and sites of traumatic historical events. She brings with her equipment designed to detect disturbances in the soil, irregularities in the earth that might suggest that something significant occurred there. In the center of what was once the rose garden, her equipment detects an anomaly. Beneath the soil, there is a void. It is not large, perhaps, a few feet in diameter, but it is distinctly present, distinctly different from the surrounding earth. Dr. Chun requests permission to excavate, but the current landowner denies it. The site is left undisturbed. But in her report, Dr. Chun speculates about what might be beneath that small area of void space. Could it be remnants of the original sanctuary? Could it be the last piece of Colonel Silas Blackwood's elaborate structure, the last physical evidence of what he built? Could it be, in some metaphorical sense, the heart of what he attempted to accomplish, a space designed to preserve, now empty, the preservation mechanism itself, destroyed by time and nature and war? These are questions that remain unanswered, and they will likely remain unanswered because the current owners of the land are reluctant to disturb it, reluctant to excavate what might be beneath the surface, reluctant to transform the symbolic void into a concrete historical fact. And perhaps this is appropriate. Perhaps the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood is best told as something that exists primarily in the realm of narrative rather than in the realm of physical fact. Perhaps the real story is not what happened, the burial, the medication, the death in darkness, but rather what that event means, how we interpret it, what it tells us about the capacity of love to transform into obsession, about the human need to control those we love, about the ways that apocalyptic thinking can justify the unjustifiable in the end. The tragedy of Colonel Silas Blackwood is not that he was unique, but that he was not. The pathology he exhibited, the obsessive love, the need to control, the conviction that possession is protection, is not confined to him. It exists in many people, in many forms, many degrees of severity. Colonel Silas Blackwood simply took the pathology to its ultimate extreme, simply allowed his obsession to express itself in the most terrible way possible. And for that reason, he haunts us. Not because he was a monster, he was not, but because he was a man who loved his daughters, a man who believed he was protecting them, a man who allowed his mind to construct a world in which burying them alive was the most loving thing he could possibly do. And that possibility, that ordinariness combined with terrible acts, that love transformed into tragedy, is perhaps the most disturbing thing of all. The lullabies still seem to echo from the soil. The roses still seem to bloom in patterns too intentional to be natural. And the void beneath the earth, that small space where something was preserved, where something died in darkness, remains, a permanent mark on the landscape, a wound in the earth that will never quite heal, a reminder that the most terrible acts are often committed by those who believe themselves to be acting out of love. In 2018, a musician and composer named James Harrow begins working on a piece of music inspired by the story of Colonel Silas Blackwood. He researches the historical accounts, reads the diary entries, studies the psychology, and becomes obsessed with understanding what the lullaby might have sounded like, the lullaby that Silas hummed to the ground, the lullaby that he believed would reach his daughters beneath the earth. Through interviews with descendants of the Blackwood family, through historical research into period music, Harrow reconstructs what he believes the lullaby might have been. It is a simple melody, the kind of melody that a father might hum absently while thinking of those he loves, the kind of melody that could be both tender and haunting depending on how it is. Played, Harrow's composition, a piece for solo, cello, and sparse orchestration, is performed for the first time in 2019 in a concert hall in Atlanta. The piece is titled "The Lullaby of the Buried." When the performance ends, many of those in the audience report an unusual experience. They found themselves weeping without knowing exactly why. They found themselves thinking about those they love, about the capacity for obsession that exists in all of them, about the ways that the desire to protect can transform into the desire to control in the years since. The composition has been performed many times, and those who perform it report the same phenomenon, a strange emotional response from audiences, a sense that something deeper than the music itself is being communicated, a feeling that the piece is conveying something that words cannot express. The composer has stated that he does not know where the melody comes from, that it seems to have existed before his conscious creation of it, that he was simply the vehicle through which it expressed itself. And somewhere beneath the soil of northern Georgia, beneath the overgrown land where the Blackwood Plantation once stood, in the void space that remains undisturbed beneath the earth, something seems to listen. It listens to the lullaby. It remembers the hands that hummed it. It remembers the voice that sang it to the darkness. and perhaps in some realm that exists beyond human understanding, beyond the boundary between life and death, beyond the separation between consciousness and oblivion. Three daughters hear the familiar song, and for a moment, just for a moment, they feel, once again, the presence of their father, and they are, finally, safe.